So, Restaurants app. I'm continuing explanation of this example at the previous that I started at the previous lesson. That is video recorded, and video recording is already posted. When I was explaining the app, I realized that I made mistake when I switched from Moshi library to using a serialization of Kotlin into JSON library and plugin. The reason is for the bug. No, the reason for the bug was not enough testing. But why did it happen? Because Moshi library just ignores stuff inside of JSON that we don't declare, so we don't get it. About behavior of serialization, deserialization plugin of Kotlin is different. It doesn't ignore things inside of JSON if we do not declare this in the classes. It will just throw exception. So this is how to get default behavior such ways that tags inside of JSON are ignored if we do not declare them inside of the objects that we expect to receive. So in a project remote, I declared restaurant remote restaurant, and this object is supposed to match what we expect to receive. Tags inside of, or annotations inside of this class is depending on library. So in this case, I'm using serialization library of Kotlin. So tag is serializable, serialized name. But if we use Moshi library, these annotations will be different. The same about JSON library. So these annotations in the objects that we expect to receive is depending on the library. By the way, the new textbook that was published this weekend, I would already discuss it. For some reason, it's using Moshi library. And I'm not going to change it. So you will have Moshi example and this example. This example was changed from JSON to Moshi. Now I change it to approach in the Google course using Kotlin serialization. But I will not do it in next example. So in the retrofit module, I declared JSON object with extra instruction, ignore unknown keys, true, and when we create converter factory in retrofit builder, I'm using that JSON object. So this issue was solved in front of you by simple googling of this issue, and it came up almost immediately. I pushed this code change after the lesson was over. So if you use code like what you got in the beginning of the previous lesson, you don't have it. So refresh your code or just reclone it again. So it has changed this part and this part. Otherwise, it will be the same. It is a potential issue such way that it will crash if you get tags that is not declared in your classes. Speaking about modules. If you compare structures or dependency injection in this project, you will see that dependency injection is declared in more than one module. I have an object that I decided to call retrofit module that is taking care of dependency injection related to network communication. What does it do? It is providing a retrofit object which is injectable into parameter of provide restaurants app. And provide RestaurantsApp is creating Restaurants API object using retrofit library that implements Restaurants API interface. Restaurants API interface is declared here. Get all restaurants, and we receive list of remote restaurants objects. So if type is obvious like a list, we use library, right? But if you receive something else like list instead of something, you need to declare that class. So return type is combination of library classes and your own classes that you define like this, remote. If you use your own class here, you need to specify how it matches to the receiver JSON. This is done in this part. See? This is data field in the JSON. If you don't specify the name, it will expect exactly this name, like title. So it will still work, but it will expect word title, not our title, how it comes. Why did they do it with 3 modules? So in my local path with a local package contains database module that takes care of dependency injection using database, right, for database objects. Like DAO is injected to repository, like you see Restaurants API will be also injected into repository implementation. If we click on this one, you will see that it is injected into implementation of the repository. So why do I have, by the way, I have 2 or 3? I have 3. Why do I have 3 modules? For local database and for a remote connection, our explanation is separation of concerns. We definitely have 2 parts of the application that separate from each other, so it makes sense to create 2 different modules. Although we could combine it into one module by just copy-pasting stuff from one module to another one. For example, I really mean that if we copy-paste, if we open database module and copy-paste this stuff into retrofit module and delete database module, it will work just fine, no issues, 0 issues. Okay, so the fact that I have 2 modules, it is for separation of concerns, no other reason at all. So we can just copy-paste it into one of them and delete the other one. But there is something more that is not like that. In the repository module, I have, in the repository package, I have repository module. And please notice that 2 other modules are objects. See, object. But when we open repository module, we will see its abstract class. So this piece is not copy-pastable into 2 others. Okay. So this is definitely different under the code. Why do I need it? No, I don't. Previously, I created one module. Remember, in the product list app, I had one module that was taking care of database and repository. Right? I didn't have a module specifically for repository. We could definitely put it into database module code related to creating the repository. But we definitely couldn't copy-paste this one, because that function is supposed to tell the system how to create the object, but this is abstract. This is not telling how to create the object, it is telling how to match interface to implementation. System will still use information from this abstract class, probably to generate something else. But this, as you see, it is not providing information to the system how to create the object. Previously, we were calling constructor of the repository, right? And if I want to use the same approach, I will open database and just create provides restaurants repository. I will call constructor in that function, and it will work. Why do I use different approach? I don't have to. It is explanation of new topic. That instead of calling constructor of repository in the module that is an object, we can use different approach. We can define module which is abstract class and tell the system which of the implementation to use for the interface. Restaurant repository is interface. No, it's not this one. Restaurant repository is interface. Implementation is only one. Some dependency injection system, like a Spring Framework in Java, can figure it out which of the objects to use if you have only one. It's not difficult, it's only one. It is not the case in Android. We have to tell explicitly which of the objects to use. And when we tell which of the objects to use, we still need to provide information how to create this object. It's not just telling which to use. This is telling which to use. Okay? But this is not enough. We still need to provide information how to create this object. So it is, in my opinion, probably unnecessary step, but it's necessary to get it compiled. So it is, I would say, it's unnecessary complexity to explain the new topic. So how we can provide information how to create the object? You're already familiar with approach, and you use this approach to in view models. See, you say healed view model inject, but this is specific to view model. What I use for repository is not specific to repository, and this will create any object injectable. So what did we learn? We can create any object injectable two ways. Is to write a function inside of a module that marked with provide that returns object of the kind that you need to inject. And you can mark it singleton if you want only one object of this kind. That was a previously explained approach. For view model, we have a different approach designed for view model. It is healed view model. But this approach will apply to any kind of object. Repository, it is just an object. It has nothing special in it. How it works? You need to make constructor injectable. This is the only thing required. If you provide additional restriction, you need to have only one object of this kind. You write singleton on top of it. And so this approach applies to making any kind of object injectable, except it is like view model, because view model is a separate issue. It is integrated into Android framework. This is technically part of the Android injection system, HILT, right? But it applies to any, it can be applied to any object that you create. Repository is not special in this case. In this particular example, we write inject in front of constructor, and it will work only if these two parameters are injectable. Otherwise, it will just crash when program either compiling or starting. Two possibilities. A restaurants API object is already injectable because, remember, I provide restaurants API, and this is restaurant API object. See? So it is already injectable there. Here it is. A DAO is also injectable. Remember that in the module, database module, I made DAO injectable by writing provides, returning restaurant DAO. Okay. So this approach, what you saw, creating injectable object by defining injectable inject constructor, or constructor market with inject, does apply for any object, but parameters should be injectable. Otherwise, it will fail to either to compile or to start. Both situations are possible. But constructor that is receiving injection doesn't have to be default constructor or primary constructor. So you can create a primary constructor with parameters if you want, and create another constructor that receives different parameters that will be marked with inject. So inject does not have to be next to primary constructor. It can be next to some other constructor, and in this case, that other constructor will be used in dependency injection. Where did we see it? We already saw it in part of the code that I brought up at the previous lesson. It was part of the code of product list. So let's open that. Projects. New window. It's a new window, but my previous window is gone. I don't know where it is. I'll probably have to open that again. So, in the repository of product list, where's the repository of product list? No, local product list repository is implementation of product repository. You see that primary constructor has 3 parameters, but it doesn't have inject next to it. But I have another constructor receiving the injection, product DAO. Why? For obvious reasons, these parts are not injectable. So I cannot, if I like coroutine scope, coroutine dispatchers are not injectable. So the easy way to go around is just to create another constructor and just define those values like brute force. Like coroutine scope is global scope in this case. External scope is global scope, and dispatchers is dispatchers IO. Why these 3 parts are given as parameters, although they is eventually assigned to constants? The reason is testability. So this class can be tested with different scope and different dispatcher if necessary. So this trick is from recommendation of Google, developerandroid.com. I picked this idea. When they finally explained how to switch scope to global, and this is like literally copy-paste from their code. But what they did, they didn't have this constructor. The reason is that that piece of code on the screen didn't have dependency injection, but it's quite straightforward to figure out that why it doesn't have inject next to it. It doesn't have inject next to it because I simplified this so much that I put everything into data module now. Right? It was inject on top of it. I just deleted it because I collected everything into one module. But when we bring this logic into current code, into current example, I would have to create constructor with inject on top of it. So I've already opened that example. I don't know where it's gone and why it's gone. So, I mean, RestaurantSapp, new window, and yeah, now it is. So if I want to add external scope and dispatcher as extra parameters like this inject has to go into separate constructor declared below. This is what I mean. This is what I will probably do. When we change this code to run it from refresh button. Because refresh logically should be global. If we store data in database, it is reusable data. So if you return back, you want to see fresh data probably. Or you navigate to another screen where it doesn't have a refresh button, but you already click at refresh, so you want to see fresh data. You don't want refresh killed. So I will change to the same approach, but to make a refresh global. Scope of refresh task global. And we will see how it works. So this will be changed. So what is new topic? Multiple modules. We can have more than one. And specifically module that is matching interfaces to implementations. Previously we matched in an interface to implementation, but by just calling constructor of the implementation a brute force. This is how it was done in product list. You see data module. You see provide repository. Where is that provide repository? Here it is. Provide repository. This is return type. Product repository, which is interface. How did they match implementation to the interface? I just call it constructor of the implementation. Brute force, probably the shortest. No, not probably, it is definitely the shortest. Why do I have it differently? To explain new topic, only this reason. A new topic from Hilt. So what's next? Let's go to repository. A repository, in this case, it is quite fancy, and it is using two data sources. One data source which is network connection, right? And the other one, it is local database. Which part is actually fancy? Where it is? I'm looking at local product repository instead of restaurant repository. Local product is not fancy. A restaurant repository has one fancy function, and you can guess it is refresh function because this is doing the most of the job. Other functions just delegate stuff to, not delegate, delegate is coding, like loaded work, like I use other objects to do the task and to do data conversion. But refresh, you see, it is quite on its own. It's doing stuff on its own. Since I owe for network was explained before, like API, implementation of API, and I even quickly repeated it today. Let's see database part now, and after this we will return to refresh task. Database part in this example is not trivial, and the reason why it's not trivial is not because it's necessary. The reason is to explain additional topics. So let's open that. Local, and see this package is about local database. You already saw database module that is creating database. In this case, I'm not using singleton pattern like it is in previous example. I think like it is in inventory app, right? In this example, I just call database builder inside of the provides function. And writing singleton on top of it make sure that it is singleton. So I didn't have to use singleton design pattern inside of database class. So database class is just abstract class with declaring abstract DAO. Please notice that if you want to have more than one object stored, you don't need to, and you shouldn't create two databases for it. You define more than one entity. Entity, it's an object that you want to store. Declaration of the object that you want to store. Please notice that this is array. It means you can have a comma-separated stuff in it. So if you want to store restaurants and users, you will have a local restaurant class, comma, user class, comma. If you want to store something else, comma, that's something else. And probably you will, if you want, you can have more than one DAO. Typically, what I saw in examples of people wrote the code, it is DAO per object, but it's not necessarily the case. No, DAO per entity, but it's not necessarily the case. There is no restriction that you have to have a DAO per entity. In some cases, you will end up with having combination of entities in some DAO. In this case, besides entity, we also have a partial entity, whatever it's called. I think it's called partial entity. What is the difference? It is used in queries, but it does not match it to the row. Please notice that there is no entity on top of it. There is no word entity on top of it. And textbook has word entity on top of it. And textbook is wrong. So it's a mistake. So if we use a class to interface a table in database that contains only partial data, this is not entity. And that class should not be marked with entity. But if you want to match columns properly, like you don't have a direct link between variable name and column name, you really have to provide column info. So what did I create? I created class isFavorite that retrieves only information if particular ID item is favorite or not. A return type doesn't have to be a class that we declare. We could return type just a simple type like Boolean, integer, and it will be fine. I mean return type of methods inside of a DAO. In this case, ID is obviously parameter, right? Why on earth I would create ID as extra field in the object when I can just return Boolean? First version that it is just explanation of another topic. It's not necessary, but it is for information. But it's not the case. Of course, it is the explanation of new topic. It's good to know. But it's not the reason why this class is created. This class is created to retrieve information as array of items. So this way I can make a query, give me information about all stored favorites. I mean, if I make a query like this, a return type will be array of these objects that will contain ID of this object and I don't know, favorite or not favorite, whatever. Okay, some query that returns information about objects and this information is a favorite or not. Let's imagine such situation. Some query about favorite status of restaurants in specific city. I don't know. It is not implemented, but potentially, right? Could be. In this case, if I do so, it would be the best return type would be just a list of objects with ID and favorite or not favorite. Right. So it is for similar purpose that was implemented with preserving data during refresh. Why? Because I need to retrieve information about favorites, update database, and reinsert this information back. Because favorites do not come from internet, it is local data. So let's see what happens in DAO. In restaurant DAO, as usual, we mark it with DAO. I'm asking for the flow. It is select all from the restaurant, and the return type is flow defined by this return type. This function is not suspend, as previously explained. Suspend functions also exist here. Take a while to execute. So this is a feature of them. They are suspendable, but we use suspendable functions for the tasks that take a while to execute. Functions that return flow immediately because it's empty. And when it will execute query, data is available as a result of the query, it will be inserted in the flow. So here it is. I have get restaurant by ID, select all from restaurant by ID is equal to that. A return type is nullable. Why it's nullable? Because you provide ID, but when item is not there, it will return null. What if you say return type is not nullable, but you make query give me this object with ID that is not in the database? So type is not nullable, but you use ID which is not in the database. It will be crashed. Okay, I tried. Last time I tried it is crashed. It should never happen because this query is done, get by ID, and this program is done on click. If you click it on something, it's the something in the database. So what's the choice? Right? Unless database is refreshed automatically, you click on an item, you go to another page, and when you go into another page, by chance, one in gazillion years, the database is refreshed while you were navigating. So when you go to details page, query will be for ID that is not there. That would never happen in our scenario, but because data is the same. But potentially, a return type may be null. This is the point. absurd restaurant. Please notice this is not insert. It is absurd. This is also first time when we see this, and first time when we see the word. This word absurd is combination of insert and update. So if we provide restaurant, or in this case restaurant list, if it is not in the database, it will insert them. If they are not in database, it will insert them. And if it is there, it will update them. So the word made up word absurd, it's combination of insert or update. We didn't have this in other examples, but yeah, here it is. Next, this is update. And in this case, as you see, I'm using partial entity. And when we use partial entity, we still need to tell the system where to use it, for which table. So we specify actual entity next to update, so the system knows where to apply it. And please notice there is no query here. When I call update is favorite, for that, since is favorite is not entity, it needs to know which table to update. So we provide this information next to update by mentioning entity of the tables that we are about to update. So this is definitely new information. Also, update is favorite when I provide lists. And this is definitely used to restore information about favorites after update of the database. Okay. A refresh button updated database, and previously retrieved list of favorites now needs to be inserted back. So I call update for the list of favorites. A function that returns just list of integers. So it's another query based function, right? Get IDs of favorite restaurants. A brute force, select ID from restaurant where is favorite is equal to 1. Okay. Return type of the list, so it will create a list of integers. Okay. Next, in this case, return is Boolean. So get is favorite by ID, we provide ID, and return is true or false. So this is what I mentioned before. In order to return type is not necessarily the objects that we create. It can be, if it is logical, could be integer, Boolean, whatever. In this case, it's Boolean. Because select is favorite from restaurant where ID is equal to that, data type is Boolean there. What is this? It is update restaurant to set the favorite from this Boolean for this ID. So function we call is set update and two parameters. ID goes here, see? Marker starts with column, and is favorite goes here. Also, there is a function toggle is favorite by ID. So this function, I believe, it's not used. It is in the example just to show transaction. We already had transaction in some example, and this is another case. When we did have transaction? It was stack demo. In order to delete last item, I was making query to determine largest ID. Largest ID obviously is the last item, and it was deleting last item with that ID. So it was several updates linked in one transaction. In this toggle status, favorite status by ID, it needs to know current status, needs to change it, and it needs to update it. Right? So first it is asking what is the current status. Get is favorite by ID, so it is return type is Boolean. Then it is calling set is favorite by ID. This is ID, and I'm setting opposite to is favorite. Okay. And query delete all from restaurant, delete all restaurants. By the way, this will not work on some database systems, but it works on SQLite. If you try to do this one for MySQL, it will not execute it. The reason is that it is dangerous, right? For danger of accidentally deleting data. So some databases like MySQL will not let you to do it. For deleting of everything in the table, there is another command for MySQL, in MySQL. And refresh restaurants. That is doing only refresh, but it's not preserving ID. So first, in order to preserving favorites, first you have to retrieve the list. After this, call refresh and update the update data back from the retrieved the list of favorites. So what do I have here? A refresh restaurants, and this is the list that will be in absurd, right? So what does it do? It deletes all and inserts the list. So technically it says, since this function cannot do network query, right? It relies on the given list provided by the function that did the network query. Right? So this is the definition of DAO, and implementation, and DAO will be implemented automatically because it's mentioned in the abstract class of the database, right? Do I have data converters? I doubt. So if I open database restaurant, no, restaurant database, here it is. You see there is no converters. Converters are defined as extra line here on top of the database. Where did we see converters? I artificially added this to product list. Product list has 2 converters. No, not 2. It has 4 converters for 2 custom types. One for enumeration type, one for date. Date is not custom type. A date is standard Java type, but it doesn't have a standard conversion to SQL type, so I had to do converter for that. And it is in product list. I think the database part is explained, repository is not explained. It's probably time to have a break because it's 1:20, so let's have a break.